So I just wanted to make sure it was available to us. It's on here, but I
just look at it.
Is it there now?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what might have happened.
Okay, just clarification.
Yeah.
Yep, thank you.
Okay. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, discussion items. Our favorite time of year, audit. All right.
And do you want your slides up?
Yep, might as well.
Okay. Sounds good. I got it. Yeah.
So those can pass around, that's fine. I'll sit at the end of the table. Here, get into the charts and the graphs. So I had to pass around.
No, I've got, no, like you've done right here. Everybody else has theirs.
I had to pass around draft items for tonight. We are, everything's signed off and done. We're ready to roll final copies. So logistic days couldn't make it happen this afternoon. Okay. So, yeah, a copy for me. Maybe.
Christmas program.
I have this. We just get ready to start reading on it. So if you want to look at the thicker document, you're welcome to. I'm going to focus on the thinner one. It says executive audit summary. Yeah, on the first or second page, so it's executive audit summary across the page. But page one of the thinner document basically gives you a one-page overview of the audit results. So they're issuing a clean report on the audit, so we're good with numbers and disclosures. Had all the support that we asked for and wanted and needed. So thank you, Glenn, for that. We tested, looked at internal control processes. We tested statutory compliance for the state, for the district, as well as student activity funds. Out of all that testing, I have one minor finding to report to you. It's just basically on, you have some checks outstanding that haven't cleared or been cashed yet. And this is checks you've written to others, but that have not been cashed for over 3 years. So it's just a housekeeping item. You have to report those to the state as unclaimed property. That's all I have for you for findings. So very good audit. We'll jump into the charts and graphs and we'll go over some numbers here. Should start on about, I think it's 11 or 12 in the packet. So, give it.
No.
Okay.
Just wait a minute.
All right. I'll give you that.
Wrong one. Was he asking for a pointer? Because I appreciate knowing what you're talking about.
All right.
It's just for the laser pointer it's on. Or are you going to do the slides, or are you going to have Ann do the slides? What do you want to do?
Oh. Okay. That doesn't matter.
We can
do that too.
He's got both.
there. Now you're good to go.
So I start writing one.
There we go.
It's like that.
And there's a pointer. Everyone's look at that.
It is.
All right, we got a count shelf here now.
Yeah, that's a good.
All right. So, blocking your.
Well, everybody has a copy of it, so they can look on their copy as well.
All right. So, all right. Well, we'll just give you the high-level overview of the general fund. So, that's the main operating fund of the district. Closed the year with just over $21.1 million in revenue. Expenditures were 21.2 or $20,250,000 about. Had a net reduction in fund balance of $118,000. So closed the year, ending fund balance is just under $3 million. A couple of things that I can kind of see, as far as like the spend down of 118,000, you had an LTFM, a couple LTFM projects, one for a fire alarm system upgrade and tile flooring in the preschool. And then coming out of unassigned, a wireless upgrade for high school and elementary. So kind of more capital related expenditures, if you will. So kind of one time.
And those were both planned for.
Right, one time deals. So end of the year with healthy fund balance. If we look at the next slide, this is the unrestricted fund balance. So basically fund balance you have discretionary control over as far as the use and the timing. $1,884,000 in unrestricted, and that represents about 8.9% of annual expenditures. So kind of your goal is to have a minimum of 5%, and you're above your goal. Restricted fund balance in this category, this one you pretty much kind of hold pretty steady. You use the allocations or the resources that come in from the state. So this is going to be a little combination of mostly state aid, but a little bit of levy dollars. But what's coming in here is staff development, medical assistance, basic skills, and the ALC is and your bigger ticket items here. And when we talk about fund balance, I mean, balance is resources ending up that carry forward into the next year. Operating capital, this one was holding steady as well. This is pretty much what's running through here is technology purchases and hardware rental for the online school. Is what's going through this category. Health and safety is, this is about we'll probably talk about it next year, but otherwise we're not going to talk about it other than one more time. This is a category that is closing out after that 18-19 school year. So there's basically what happened from here to here, 15 to 16 is the state caught you up with levy dollars. So spending and projects in health and safety stopped with the 2017 year. So there's no additional expenditures in there. The way this category had always worked is you had to do the project first and then the state would pay back in the trailing 2 years. So basically there's minimal adjustments coming through in 18-19. It's going to end at negative, but it'll basically close out with that unrestricted balance at the end of next year.
So we won't have this slide next year?
You won't have it. No, it's gone. And what replaced health and safety was long-term facilities maintenance. So this is basically then where the fire alarm and the tile flooring came through on this slide. That's what happened in 2018. Anything coming through here is part of your 10-year capital facilities plan. So that's all that gets spent. So if it's not in the plan, it doesn't go through this category. So what affects it, the fund balance up or down, mostly is timing when projects are done. So any capital related items you and most other districts try to do in the summer months, and when you have a June 30 year end, whether you do the project in June versus July makes a difference on the fund balance. Food service, this is one, the food service is basically operates to itself. We've been with Tager for 3 years now and have built positive fund balance in that short amount of time. And that does basically carry forward. The main point with food service fund balance is the only place it can be used is back in food service in the kitchen. So it's not, it doesn't take money away from the classroom, but it can't give money to the classroom either. Kind of similar with community service. So here, school readiness and early child have been two very good programs. You receive Pathways funding grants to help with that as well. The Capital Projects Fund, this is your bond project. So the bond project's done. Building project back in 2016. So there is basically a residual fund balance there. And that's something that, basically the only place I can close out to now is the debt service fund, unless you can get approval for some additional projects to use it up.
Yeah, we're no piping and, yeah.
Do they have to pre-ask for that, or can we just do it?
No, we've already been talking to Sarah Miller.
Oh, okay, so that's it.
Yep.
Debt service fund, this is just basically accumulates funds to pay now the biggest portion you guys your 2016 bond. So the construction bond we were talking about, the payment started on that in 2017. So what happened from 17 to 18 is now levy dollars. You're catching up and you're getting levy dollars coming through to make those bond payments. So what's going forward, what typically happens here is you see a slow build on the debt service fund. You're required by statute to levy at 105% of the coming year's principal and interest payments. So when your taxpayers pay their taxes and perform, which yours typically do, you'll see a slow build on fund balance here. General fund revenues, so kind of shifting from fund balance to talk about revenues just briefly here. This is going to be this includes the online school, as well as your traditional K-12 districts. So this slide looks a little bit different. About 90% comes from state sources, so 90% of your total funding. About 5% from federal. And then we'll start we'll tackle back and forth here over the next several slides between looking at numbers with the online school included, as well as just your K-12 excluding online. So enrollment for the online dropped a little bit in 2018, so 1,925 students. This is more measured or weighted according to how the state provides funding, so it isn't raw student count, but it's weighted according to how funding comes through from the state. Compare that to I'll call it traditional K-12. Enrollment held pretty steady, down about 6 students. So state funding wise, 6 pupil units, about $6,200 per student for state aid. It was about 38 grand in state aid funding, and did not receive. So kind of counterpoint to that, the general education formula rate increased $120 a student. So kind of, even though your student numbers are down, you get more funding per student. Looking at vocational, this is going to be K-12 only. So vocational instruction is just, it really depends on a couple things. The number of programs you're offering, as well as the licensing of the faculty teaching it. So this graph is a couple, I think, where is
It's just one page back.
Yeah, one page back, so 19. So kind of how these charts and graphs work now is the bars at the left are going to be Houston, the bars at the right are going to be kind of statewide benchmarks. So the first bar is going to be districts all districts in the state of up to 500 students. When we're talking K-12, local K-12 only. And then the far right bar is all districts in the state, so it just gives you a little bit of an idea. How you compare to others is then what we're also doing is building this out now. So each iteration of the audit will add another year, so we'll probably build it out to about a 5-year trend for you. 2018 was basically supplies related purchases that you did not have in the previous year.
But it also shows the desire of our local kids for those classes that fall under the vocational type class, whether it's in business or in industrial tech.
Industrial tech, and a lot of schools have scaled back or dropped industrial tech altogether. So,
and it's very popular here.
So it makes a difference in program offerings. Special education, this includes online, but this is running through HVED. So, basically your costs are staying very stable here. And it was kind of like HVED, you're getting kind of the desired effect there of kind of maintaining and controlling those costs. Instructional support services is, let's see, this one is staff development, library and media center, technology, possible in here, so we're looking at costs on a per student basis. We had more staff development spending, and then also phone and software licensing fees came in higher in 2018 than the previous year. Pupil support is going to be local only. This is counseling and school nurse and social services, and psychological stuff that kind of comes through here too. So overall, holding pretty steady about here. 300 to 350 a student, cost-wise. Sites, buildings, and equipment. This is going to be basically the traditional K-12 buildings, kind of the cost of being in a building. So it covers utilities, repairs, custodial costs come through in this category, and then any long-term facilities maintenance repair items come through here as well. Food service, we kind of saw in the it's holding pretty steady now. The differential from here to 17 to 18 basically had a stove purchase a year ago and did not. So that's what generally fluctuates the cost up or down, is whether or not you have capital purchases when it comes to the food service line. Transportation, this is busing costs, and we're looking at those costs for local only on this slide. And what there was higher fuel costs in 2018, again, supply purchases, so that was kind of the difference compared to the previous year. Community service, I don't have anything particular to add there. Costs are staying pretty stable, pretty good program. Capital expenditures, here, what I kind of see happening is he did the big building project with the bond funded project back in 2016, so you didn't have a lot of capital related items coming through in the general fund, because it was all taken care of with the bond project. And now we're a couple years out from the bond project, and you're starting to see some of the capital spending come back into the general fund. So this, for 18, some of your capital items here was bus garage, parking, preschool tile floor, fire alarm upgrade, and wireless upgrade for high school and elementary. School district administration supports.
This is back on page 18.
Yep. Yeah, the order got a little goofy with me, but what's making the difference here also, and as well as on your instructional support, is going to be your instructional tech administration, so it'll be program 605. So where we categorize those.
Our numbers are different than yours.
Yeah, so
Yours says
619 is
Yours
right.
says 542.
It's so the 619 is the the right one. So it is staying very stable. Regular instruction, then this is all online. And let's see, we have some additional purchases in there. Yeah, there's more consulting fees coming through on Minnesota Virtual Academy. So with your online school, higher consulting fees in 2018 through there. Local is more a factor of kind of the number of students, even when you're dividing between 425 students, a few up or down affects the height of the 2018 bar. This was the first year of the contract that you're in right now with your faculty in 17, and then I believe also some supply purchases coming through here as well. And looking at debt on your local K-12, this is mostly just your 2016 construction bonds, and as those pay off and absent issuing new debt, that should stay pretty level and slowly start to decrease. Nothing new to talk about with the construction, so this is back in 16 was the big bond project. That's done. And that's in my slide deck. That's what I have for audit report.
Anybody have any questions?
I did want to say that part of it looked like a deficit. The actuarial statement was that we need to start putting money aside for any employee that wants to retire at 55 and is not yet eligible for Medicare. And so that in setting that aside, it's really not that we're losing that money, but it did impact that deficit amount because we had to set it into a different fund. Now, if we don't need that money, that's money that we can use again. There are some schools, because I called Craig right away and I said, what are some other schools doing? And he said some schools are choosing not to follow GASB and not setting it aside because it's not a set aside like staff development. Once it's set aside, it's earmarked there. You can't use it for anything else like long-term facility maintenance, staff development. Once those are set aside, they're staying there forever. This is one of those where it's just kind of in a holding pattern and you can pull it out again. Because legislatively someone is trying to float a bill to say that with health insurance, there's a bill floating that somebody's trying to put Medicare down to 55 instead of having people wait, thinking that would help with some of the Affordable Care Act things. And so I asked Craig if that bill by some miracle does get ratified, then that money, and he said, yeah, you pull it right back out again. So I didn't want people thinking we're 118,000 in the hole.
So how much did you set aside?
The set aside, we followed the actuarial statement, and the set aside was 33,000.
No, it was 300.
300,000, yeah.
Well, it's-
So it's up
Yeah.
to, it's up.
I did just a zero.
Which what?
Yeah. So we've got almost $1 million set aside in there.
And we can pull that out as it's got restrictions to any use.
No, there's no, it's discretionary, the set aside
Oh,
that you're doing is
so we can do whatever we want.
discretionary, yeah. So it's a.
But we aren't, one of the reasons that we get clean audit reports and we don't have findings is because we are following the GASB. And part of following GASB is following that actuarial table.
Yeah.
So it's showing negative 118,000, and that's because we took 300,000 and put it somewhere else.
It's what, I know the 118 is there, what we're talking about when we looked at the actual pupil units, we've got 6 kids where we budgeted for 6 kids more than what we had. And that's actually where we have that slight deficit, because as far as our budget, we were, if you look at the approved budget and where we came in, we were actually 5,000 under that. So we stayed right with that budget, within 5,000. However, the actual revenue we got was about 32, as Craig was saying, less than what we were expecting. And so the actual deficit this year was closer to taking the 5,000 and the 32, we were closer to about 27 under. And I know that you're looking at the 118 negative, and it's closer to 27,000 negative.
Why is it 118 then?
Well, that's the couple of capital items that came through through the
From
general
prior
fund.
year or something, or?
No, it was a capital project, spending, so wireless,
We had budgeted some long-term facility maintenance things.
right.
And we're,
Into the adjusted budget, so we had almost a $70,000 loss because we knew that money was coming out of the long-term facility maintenance fund balance.
Did we go over that as a finance committee? Do you remember? Okay, good, 'cause I don't- Okay, so the 300,000 had nothing to do with this general fund, 118 then.
Not really, the 300,000 is, what's being designated of our,
Unassigned.
Unassigned.
All right, so it doesn't affect to make this negative, it's because we had less earnings and we had some large capital expenses come in that caused it to be negative.
but as you're looking, if you read through this whole thing, you'll see all of a sudden there's this 300,000 line, and you're like, what the heck?
Yep.
So I wanted to.
So what is the projected enrollment next year? Or this year? Or what, I guess we're about to approve taxes and we were getting less money, right? And we're holding it steady, and now we're saying we lost money.
Well, and we did tighten the belts this year already. As you remember, we reduced a teacher at the elementary school. There was a position that wasn't filled at the high school, and we reduced a half-time position here. So that should be enough to offset holding steady. But yeah, we do have inflation. Inflation's running right now at about 2.2%. So we might have to look at more cuts for next year.
But as far as you said, it was 6 students that we didn't have that were short. I mean, are we the same? Are we 6 more students short this year?
And that's,
I know it's probably hard to tell because kids come and go, but
because I know I went on the MDE site and I went into Gwen's office and I said, MDE says we have 501 students. Where are all these kids? Because I don't think I see 501 here. But that's counting some of the preschool kids who don't generate any funding. So
next year we're gonna be at the same pupil unit.
So we'll be
Approximately.
watching the pupil units closely.
Right. So I guess kind of with the unrestricted what we're kind of talking about is the unrestricted bucket, you know, as far as like students and stuff, and, you know, the unrestricted bucket, yeah, you had about $50,000 decrease, and most of that is the 6 students times the general education formula rate. To Corinne's point, in the million, you know, part of this $1.8 million includes that $950,000 earmark for
Set aside,
for the
that we could always pull.
that you could pull back. So what had been, just so you know, kind of the history lesson on that, under the accounting standards prior to this year for the post-employment benefit liability, it had been building more on looking at how it was funded, or a funding approach, rather than looking at the full accounting liability. Well, this year we're looking at the full accounting liability, and that's what went on the books. So, you know, kind of hindsight being 2020, if we had that to look at again back in the summer, we said, well, it's not realistic that we're going to spend $300,000 on post-employment benefits, you know, just because the accounting standard changed. You know,
You see that change next year?
that's something that, you know, with hindsight, looking at it now, you could say, yeah, we could redirect those funds a little bit. Because the actual benefit payments, just as a point of reference, for this year on that OPEB was $42,000.
So we have 900,000 set aside, and it would never possibly be that much, I hope,
Well,
because
as best we know, well, it depends on the assumptions that you use, right? So it's an actuarial estimate, yeah. So,
But that 900,000 is included in our unrestricted. So that 8.9% that we calculate, that includes that.
yeah, but I guess what I'm saying is that would be a really bad day if all of a sudden we had to pay $900,000 in
right.
benefits when we have 1.8 in our
I
fund
don't see
balance.
it, I honestly don't see it, we would ever.
I hope not.
Right. Yep,
And
exactly.
they're going by the fact that people retire earlier. I don't see people being able to retire early, and if it is, it's a few here and there, it's not every single one of our people that can retire early.
Majority of the employees here, the teachers, there are only a few oldie moldies left that actually qualify for Rule of 90. You had to get hired before 1989, and that's just, there's a few of us, but not many.
So why do the actuarials say that it could be 900,000?
Because the contract does have a clause that say if somebody reaches the age of 55 and has worked for 15 years, they can retire and still access health insurance here.
And that's up until the age they're eligible for Medicare.
Correct.
So the actuaries, you know, they capture all those employees in their calculations.
So
So
say that number is where the number, our calculations go off of.
they have, you know, the teachers in there, the faculty who are 55 is mixed, as well as the 25-year-olds.
And what is the annual cost approximately per early retiree?
I think was that the 30?
You said 43,000?
Yeah, it's about, the benefit payments are about 43.
For how many?
So it wouldn't be that many. That I don't have as far as the number who drew benefits under it, but it was total about 42,000.
And then that 900,000, isn't that includes many years?
Oh yeah.
So it's not like we would pay 900,000 in 1 year.
Yeah, it's a fund
over
that
seven
you draw
years.
from.
Right.
Yeah.
So like, you know, they estimated liability for somebody who's 25 years old. They gotta wait. You're not gonna pay them until
Right.
it's gonna be 30 years before they even come close to growing that benefit. So.
And that's probably why it's not locked up. Because there's that.
Yeah, but I just,
Who knows what'll happen in 2 years? The rules could change.
it was a line item that caught my attention, so I just thought if you're reading through the whole document and it catches your attention, I wanted to me to be aware of that.
The other question I had was on the community service fund balance. So just to clarify, so it says 60,000. So that means we have $60,000 in that fund balance as of today.
As of June 30th
Okay.
of 18, yep. So that's what you had kind of in net resources that you can.
That's significant.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah, it's quite a change, just in a short period of time. So.
Yeah.
It used to be, probably 5 years ago, up until 5 years ago, the state, if you had built up too much of a fund balance in community service, they would kind of take it back on your, on your levy, but that all went away, so you're allowed to have successful programs now. It's good. Any other questions for him?
Thanks, Dr.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, K-12, Destination Career Academy Marketing. That's here today.
Did you want the clicker?
Thank you. I'm not certified. I don't have a credential to use it. And so I'll stick to using my finger. We'll see how that works out. Superintendent, members of the board, I want to thank you for having me back. It makes me feel as if at least the time that we spent last month was valuable to you, and hopefully the time we spend together this month will be valuable as well. Specifically, I'll be speaking about marketing associated with Destinations Career Academy program here at MNDA. I'll be speaking a little bit about financials, and frankly, speaking about any answers to any questions that you might have, being that I'm here and I'm happy to answer those. I'm assuming that we have about 15 or 20 minutes set aside to be able to go through this. So I'll go over each slide at a relatively high level, and then if there are questions, certainly let me know.
We are starting on page 1. I'm confused.
Oh, okay, you're good. We're on page 3. So from a marketing standpoint, just from a very high level, telling you something that you probably already know. Marketing is about raising awareness, developing an interest in a product or service, and then setting up a process whereby that interest can be turned into a deeper involvement with that product or service. With a cell phone, it means buying a product or buying a certain cell phone service. With students in a school, certainly it's not transactional, it's much more consultative. And so as we developed our destinations model, or started to 4 years ago, we thought about how do we set up the process so that we educate the public about the fact that there are career educational options for their students, attract them, and set up a process that's easy for them to become involved, and in fact, maybe the first day of their school experience with us, maybe a little bit ahead of the game. And so I think what you'll see in the next dozen or so slides is a reflection of those different parts that I just talked about. So for instance, and this is just one example of some of the research that we've done. In research that we've done in working with parents and students regarding career education, we found an important nugget, and that is that for high school students, about 47% of high school students, roughly half across the country, are involved intimately in making the decision as to what school they go to. So if there are options, it's not simply working with the parent to helping the parent understand what their options are, but also working with students to help them understand what their options are. From that, in the marketing world, and I don't want to dive into a lot of marketing speak, but personas are developed. And personas are simply models of certain characteristic groups that might normally be attracted to or not attracted to a certain proposition. And so our marketing team put together 3 personas based on what they found. One is the persona of pragmatic parents, what they describe as pragmatic. Usually you give a persona a name. Sometimes the names are meaningless, like you might call one Julie and one Robert, and one-to-one. But in this case, they're pragmatic, physical presence, and status quo. And found that it's the pragmatic parents that are most likely to want to engage in a full-time online career academy. And in many cases, the public perception of what an online course or an online school is actually much different than what our online schools are like. They think, for instance, that online courses are very flat and very lonely experiences. And I think the last time that we were here, we talked about the fact that we'll be launching 20 project-based learning courses next year, and project-based learning courses could not be further from lonely, isolated experiences. So at the end of the day, we have a lot of work to do on the messaging and creative end, and helping parents understand that that our courses are not so flat, and then in addition to that, that their students have the opportunity to go to a school where they can graduate with more than a high school diploma. Ultimately, our goal in developing this marketing plan is to not develop the typical K-12 marketing plan that we've used across the country that utilizes radio and television heavily, that we've used year after year after year, but to develop a different approach, because MNBA would be being marketed not just as a K-12 school, but as a Destinations Career Academy. And that'll help differentiate the school from the other K-12 schools in the state. And then in addition to that, help your families understand the unique value proposition and opportunities that they have. So in terms of how does that translate into what you might see, what might a concept be like, what might a commercial or a web page or an Instagram post look like? Right now we're in the middle of concept development, and these are two concepts. The first is live your passion, and you can see an example of that is helping students understand and contrast the idea of today. You may be involved in playing Fortnite, and there's no reason that tomorrow you can't take that passion and translate that into being a computer programmer. Or you might like to play with Legos, and there's no reason that tomorrow you can't translate that into something that has to deal with the construction industry, like being a building inspector. And then the second you can see involves a hashtag, get there from here, and capitalizes on the same types of research findings, but communicates those things out differently. Next slide, please. So before, when I talked about the finding with regard to students, that becomes really important because students go online and they're in a lot of different places than we are as adults. My wife uses Facebook a lot. She's on Facebook an enormous amount of the time. My son, who's 21, is not on Facebook so much. In fact, he's rarely on Facebook. But you might find him utilizing some of these other services and social media outlets, some of which you might not have heard of, or some of which you wouldn't have heard of unless you are a gamer like I am. So I happen to know what Twitch is as a social media network. But most people of our generation who are not grown-up kids like me don't know what Twitch is or aren't on Twitch. Next, please. Customer journey is a fancy name for the set of experiences that the average person goes through after they hear about your proposition or your product. And when we think about customer journey and how we treat from the first time somebody hears about MNBA's Destinations Career Academy to when they graduate, is something that we think about constantly, and we want to develop the best user experience possible for. And that user experience, again, is different than for a typical K-12 student or a typical K-12 school. So this slide is just meant to provide you with a contrast, especially visually, as to what that might look like, what the visuals might be. This is for a typical K-12 school. This is for our Destination Career Academies. You can see that it has a different template, but also a very different display. And that display is more geared toward the fact that we're likely to have not just parents visiting, but also students visiting who might be at least partial or complete decision makers. And I actually wish that was a little bit more clear, but my understanding is that you have slides in front of you. It's actually, and the only reason I wish it was a little bit more clear up here is because these are actually very attractive visuals that I don't think show as well up here as they actually are. Next slide, please. In addition to that, we want to capitalize, and this is solely something that our destinations career academies can take advantage of. We want to capitalize on the partnerships that we build with other companies and organizations that are in your state, so that not only do we appear on their websites and are part of their events, but they also appear on our websites and are part of the events that we have. What types of events might we be thinking about? Well, in the state of Wisconsin, the Local 139 Heavy Machine Operating Union has a booth every year at the state basketball tournament. And as part of that booth that they advertise their relationship, their partnership with our Wisconsin Destinations Career Academy as an opportunity for students to go through the pre-apprenticeship program there and then be part of the Heavy Machine Operators Apprenticeship Program later on. So I would ask the question, wouldn't it be cool to have a large union in the state of Minnesota at the state basketball tournament? To me, state basketball tournaments are cool because I was actually in one. So, but at the end of the day, wouldn't it be really great if there was somebody advertising on behalf of your school that you were a partner with intimately because you have a program associated with them? And what you see on the left are just some examples of potential partners, not necessarily partners that we already have partnerships with, but partners that we're working on partnerships with at this time. Next slide. So I talked before about the entire experience, not just developing interest, not just attracting families and getting them into the school, but also having families and students a little bit ahead of the game whenever they start day one. On our enrollment support team, we're in the process of developing and piloting enrollment counselors that are also career counselors, so that as we bring students into a Destinations Career Academy, those students can already go through an interest inventory and have a really good idea as to the difference in the experience that they're going to have as a Destinations Career Academy student versus a K-12 student. So these are students who day one would have already gone through an interest inventory, have some idea as to what opportunities maybe there are out there for them, what their relative strengths and weaknesses are, and weaknesses not necessarily pointing them away from an occupation, but helping them understand that those are areas that they might have to shore up academically if they're serious or passionate about a particular occupation. Next. Also, your local development manager, just like our local development managers at our other 13 schools, will be heavily involved in working through local being statewide, of course, but local activities that will include Destinations Career Academy specific approaches. And so I'm not going to insult your intelligence by reading things to you here, but we expect that, again, just as in other states, your local development manager will be picking events that are career related in some cases. Some of those events may be conferences for statewide organizations that are involved in career, and helping to influence and work with those different organizations so that, again, your school's name is established as a leader in the area of career readiness education. Next. So before we move on to the finance part of this, let me stop and ask if you have any questions with regard to the marketing piece, if that was something that met your expectations, or if you do have questions, what might they be? Hoping I could answer. Anybody?
Considering the pragmatic parents and the whole idea here of get to where you're going, your hashtag and that sort of thing, is there research in there about employment opportunities and how likely a student completing this program could secure employment in the state or region?
That's a great question, and I would love to have data like that. Unfortunately, our schools are young enough that we don't have a significant number of students that have graduated, had certifications, and then immediately gone into the workforce to be able to answer that. But when we look at career education on the whole, there is data that supports that students who earn certifications not only graduate at a higher rate, but also go to college at a higher rate. And the fact that they go to college at a higher rate surprises a lot of people, because when they think of career education, they think of OTech. And when they think of OTech, they think of students who go immediately into the workforce. So we can provide you, I'd be happy to send it to Scott, and Scott could provide.
I don't need it, I'm just
that type of
saying
data.
for a marketing thing, for the pragmatic parents and the
Yes.
students who want to, pursue their passion and gain employment.
We're not quite there yet, but I will tell you that if you come to the K-12 website for our Colorado Destinations Academy, this just is an example, you'll see a video of a young girl named Rain. Rain, I believe, is going into 11th grade. She's part of our business and marketing program there, and owns her own web-based cupcake company, and has been doing that for a couple of years. Not telling that story to impress anybody, that our business program is unbelievably successful and will create e-commerce entrepreneurs and giants, but to illustrate the fact that we do try to utilize that in as much as we possibly can in our market. And by the way, we do hope to create great entrepreneurs and giants in e-commerce, but we're relatively young there. Other questions?
It sounds like what you're saying is that even kids that might be college bound could get one of these certs and, like an heavy equipment operation, and use it as a summer job.
Certainly. Students who earn a pharmacy tech certification or a CNA and go on to college, in many cases, use those certifications as opportunities to earn significantly more than a minimum wage, and then to be able to translate that into either a lower student debt load or the opportunity to graduate earlier or utilize it as leverage in any way that they want to. I didn't have a certification. I do remember, though, being an engineering student and having the opportunity, because my dad was able to get me a job where he worked, but being a draftsman at the time. And the one thing that impressed me was I got paid a lot more than I did whenever I was a dishwasher at a Chinese restaurant. And that helped me get through college that year in a much more efficient way. And so in this case, we're talking about students with credentials having that same type of opportunity, not having to depend on their parents or somebody to get them a job, but having that qualification.
And my daughter did the CNA thing when she was in college, so that's a good example.
Fantastic. All right.
Any other questions?
Not on the marketing.
All right, let's talk about finances and try to decode the next two slides. So first, this is your fiscal 19 budget next to what would be the incremental budget for fiscal 20 with 400 DCA students. 200 of those students would be re-registering students. So think of them as 200 8th and 9th graders coming back to you in 9th and 10th grade, but as DCA students. And 200 other students of those 400 are 200 brand new students to your school. And we expect those are 200 students that would be attracted because of the program, not just because MNBA is a wonderful school, but because they're specifically interested in either learning more about a specific career that you offer an opportunity in, or just thinking about career. And maybe it's a good idea in 9th and 10th grade to start thinking about that. So that's where you see these numbers of 200 and 200, 400 students in all. This number is an increase in the number of students that you have. The re-registration number is not an increase in the total number of students that you have because they're re-registering, they're just re-registering into the program. As we put this financial model together, and I think Scott and I were talking about this earlier actually, and I've been with this program now for 5 years and was part of the team that put the original financial model together. One of the things that excites me about the Destinations Career Academy concept is that as an educator for over 3 decades, I've seen lots of programs in education that have come along, been underfunded either by a state government or maybe it's funded for 3 years by a grant, and then there's no more funding left. And What we felt was important was to create a sustainable program, a program, in fact, that would be more profitable perhaps as time went on, so that that money could then be brought back into the program as opportunities for other students. And I would say that that's the overarching theme that you're going to see behind the numbers that you see for our program. As we developed the model, one of the things that we committed to was being overly conservative, and I'll show you an example of that here in a moment. But we committed to that because while there's state funding available, state funding, like Perkins funding, is not always a funding promise from the state. And it's not a promise that we wanted to bake into a program and then be disappointed at the end of the day whenever that funding didn't come through as quickly as we wanted it to, or perhaps not at all as funding laws change, etc. And over this 5-year period, by the way, we've seen funding in CTE increase, not decrease. And so it's been a good 5 years. But I think we all know that these winds tend to change from time to time. And we don't want a school to have to cut back on their Destinations Career Academy program in any way, just because, and I'm using state funding as an example, but because Perkins funding might be diminished as opposed to being augmented. So a quick example of this, you'll see a line item here. This is a line item, this is probably difficult to read, but essentially this is the legal, audit, and payroll services line item. And right now in your fiscal 19 budget, that line item runs, it releases an approximation between $900 and $1,000 for your entire school. And if you've seen this slide, if you looked at the finances coming in, I would assume this would be a point of question. Why is it $25,000 here for these 400 students? And ultimately, we anticipate that legal and auditing costs may go up at one point or another, because you may have multiple programs, like the program that I just talked about with the heavy machine operators in the state of Wisconsin. Or you may be receiving state funding. And so there may be audits that occur or other legal costs that you may incur over time. However, $25,000 of costs here in your first year that we're baking into this is a little bit excessive. And it's not something that we would expect to be probable in the first year. But at the same time, we want to be transparent. We want to be as upfront as possible. And in addition to that, maybe we'll have 2 or 3 quick wins in terms of partnerships, especially by bringing a CTE coordinator and an assistant coordinator on as early as possible. And if we do, and we can develop programs quickly, then we want to be financially prepared for that. So that's also the reason that we baked a credit into this of approximately $70,000, so that in the eventuality that the legal, audit, and personnel services expenses do end up in the $25,000 range, and in the instance, the $70,000 of incremental oversight fee from the DCA fee, $120 per student, ends up being a bit of a burden the first year. We want to be sure that your budget balances out. And so we've been very conservative there. And I think you'll see that also on the next slide. Like that, please. But you'll see that on the next slide with the fiscal 21 and 22 projections. But by the same token, we're being conservative so that you know that we're prepared to offer a credit with regard to this, and so that we also are prepared to set aside a credit.
It's 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock.
Okay. I thought unbeknownst to myself, I may have told a joke. But on the other hand, I hope that made sense. But again, just use that as a way to illustrate the conservative nature of the financials that we provided for you.
That's for year 1?
That's for year 1. If you flip to years 2 and 3, with regard to projections for year 2 and 3, if these projections were to hold, there wouldn't be a need for a credit in order to balance this out. But again, you'll see this $25,000 included, and in fact, increased by $750 in fiscal year 21, just to take into account the fact that a year later, inflation occurs, and there may be an increase of cost associated with that. So any questions associated with financials?
Yes.
How long are we talking about signing on for? Is there a contract length for the program or for?
You're looking
Well,
at 10.
10 years. That's what we did prior.
It takes, anytime you're starting something, it takes a few years to get its legs under it. So you need to be able to give it time to grow too.
So, yeah, in 3 years, if the numbers aren't there, then is there still? Well, I'm just saying that the first year of squaring things up is offered, but what happens on 3 or 4 if things aren't working out the way they do?
I know that when we started the high school here, that was on the managed contract, and the K-8 was still a virtual school program, the VSP. And the first, I think, 3 years of the high school, we needed to use that credit basis to make sure that the oversight fee came to the school no matter what. And there were some times where K-12 kind of took their lumps with the high school.
Oh, so that's going to be available for past year 1 then?
Yeah, it was 3 years. This is his projection, but we need to do our part too to make sure the program grows.
Well,
And then the high school really took off, and it made sense to have the whole thing be managed because it provided the growth that we needed. And so if you remember the first, I think by year 4 of the high school, it was huge.
So to be clear, we are always concerned about schools abusing the credit line policy that we employ. On the other hand, we realize that we're adding 2 folks, and that there may be or may not be costs that hit your budget associated with them. But in your case, I don't believe there are. And then in addition to that, there are other costs that are essentially startup costs associated with the program. You're not going to be, I think the one that comes to my mind as the most inefficient part of the program startup is that you're just not going to be at scale right away. So you may have a teacher, even though we may have assumptions here of a model where the student-teacher ratio is 1 to 160, you may have a teacher with 95 students, and they may have some excess capacity, and as the year goes on, it may be possible that that gap closes. But on the other hand, that's a real possibility because we're not just predicting the number of students at your school. We're also talking about the number of students that will be in a particular program that a specific teacher is going to be qualified to teach in. And that there may be some excess capacity there until you reach scale. In other words, until you have 500 or 600 or 700 students for your business and for your healthcare program. However, I want to caution the other side of this because we have a school that planned for 400 students. It became apparent the day, at the beginning of August at least, they already had 500 students in their program. They were basically admitting all 9th and 10th graders into their program, which is what most of our schools do as a policy. And so here I think we're being more conservative than that. And by the time school started, they had over 800 students in their Destinations Career Academy program. And they had obviously not initially planned for that. The finances weren't initially set up in that direction. But the positive to that is that means that they immediately reached scale, that they didn't have that awkward period of they were hoping for 200 or expecting 200 students and they only had 307. So the other side of that during our implementation process with you all is something that we'll also consider and think about.
So is there a minimum of growth that we need to see then? Is there a line drawn that to be considered a success?
When we think about success, The basic metric that we think about is, are students getting what we're promising them? In other words, we're promising students a diploma but more. And so are we giving them an experience where they're getting a diploma and more? And one way to measure that is increased graduation rate, increased college going rate is another, improved retention is a third. There are a bunch of metrics that help to move us in that direction. All of those metrics help your bottom line. So improved retention helps your bottom line.
I follow you, and I'm talking purely dollars.
Well, what we painted here essentially is the worst case scenario.
Okay.
So as we experience success, and there's no reason to think that your program won't be successful. We have 13 other programs that are in one stage or another, first year, second year, third year, fourth year, experiencing positive growth. As the program gets better, stronger, improved retention, all those things that we would expect to have happen, then your financials, we would expect at least to end up better than this. And we put our money where our mouth is in this case, because if not, then we're the people who are going to have to issue you a credit. I'm hoping that doesn't come out of my patient.
Can I add?
Sure.
So Josh, to your question, I believe that the marketing, the dedicated marketing for this, and to Pat's point, the contribution, basically the company is very invested at this point in making this possible for kids. So I think it's really a cannot fail proposition in terms of how hard sort of all fronts are going in this direction. With the marketing that's coming there, and I think also there's a part that we need to say out loud, and that is how this is deployed within the school. Corinne's belief in the importance of this, and then how we successfully partner with those who start within the schools. I mean, that's going to be an important component of how effective we are. But in terms of the front end success, have we seen programs that didn't meet a certain? Because what he's really asking is, have we seen programs where there was a cut point where it simply didn't make?
No, we spun up 13. Excuse me, we spun up 13 programs, and we had 13 programs. So we don't have any programs that have been aborted, that have been that we stepped back from. We have programs that year over year may have had the same number of students in the next year, but there are isolated circumstances under, for instance, we have a school in Nevada where there are extenuating circumstances that have nothing to do with the Destinations Career Academy either, as to why that's the case. So you would be the first.
We don't want to be that.
We're just checking this out. We'd be the one and only in Minnesota then. Then you have proprietary, your rights that you locked in, right? We already discussed this on previous meetings. Yeah. Just wanted to air it out again.
All right, they're here. Ask questions. Anybody else?
So what we would like permission to do is, we would like permission to begin the implementation process. And in order to begin the implementation process, what we would need is, at the very least, a consensus to begin the implementation process. I realize that there is language in the contract that's coming up in January that involves the Destinations Career Academy piece. But by the same token, just from a purely selfish, but not purely selfish standpoint, from the standpoint of knowing implementation and how implementation works, and the fact that there needs to be a run-up, a runway, an opportunity to hire the coordinator and assistant coordinator, etc. The earlier that we can get started, the better. And at this time of the year, I'm lured into the idea that we've all got a week or so off, or 2 weeks, or whatever it happens to be for you all coming up. But by the same token, at the very least, we want to be able to hit the ground running with regard to your program. And that means the first week of January, at least we could begin implementation calls. We would have Taryn Jackson, our implementation specialist, teed up and ready to go for you all. And then once the contract is signed and settled and ready to go, then we can start to work with finding a suitable career coordinator for you.
So you guys on board?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't had a chance to look at the contract language at all, but yeah, definitely.
The contract is, I sent it to you guys.
Yeah.
And also the lawyer has it, Maggie has it, but the lawyer that did the last one, Chapel, is no longer with Kennedy Graven, but Maggie said they've got a new contract specialist who she's giving it to.
I mean, I'm like you, I'm in on it because I think it's a great opportunity. Anytime we can expand our kids' opportunities, you know, and to me, this is just another thing. Especially if we can be exclusive, type we talk about. So
yes, I believe it's anticipated that that's part of the contract.
Right, exactly. And I just think that's, again, it's opportunities. So, Gary?
Yeah, I agree.
Mike Lee? Josh?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. I'll Taryn later tonight when I get back to Minneapolis, and I'll already get to work tomorrow when she was planning on taking it off, which I'll enjoy in a sadistic way. If there are any questions I can help answer for you or anything that I can do for you, I'm not just going to disappear. That might be bad news, I don't know. But Corinne has my business cards. Scott also knows how to get a hold of me. I've enjoyed the 2 trips that I've had up here, although they've been quick. And if should I be requested or needed to come up again, I'm happy to.
Thank you so much for coming.
Sure.
Thank
you all.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving right along. Board update from Slumberg.
Great, thank you. A couple things. I know that you want a little bit of an update on the ALEX program and how that's going. I'll give you some data. Last year's 8th graders, I think this is probably the best comparison. Last year's 8th graders started the curriculum there 20% complete. They take this knowledge check, they're at 20%. This year's 8th graders, so they've been through the ALEX, the 7th graders, they started at 23% complete on average. So they were up, which is really good. And that doesn't take into effect, there's a few kids that are already gone on to geometry that weren't even included in this, so if they were included, that average would be a lot higher. So that's saying a little bit about that they've really made some good progress. You know, some kids made the comment, well, they didn't keep my, progress from last year. Well, that's because you took a knowledge check at the beginning of the year and you forgot a bunch of things over the summer, so you got knocked back and you had to start. But, they quickly went through that and are caught up. It's interesting, no student 7th and 8th grade failed math, which hasn't happened, Some things we learned a little bit is, our benchmarks that we kind of had equal benchmarks where they had to get so much complete at mid-quarter and quarter and all the way through. It gets tougher at the end of the year because concepts are harder because they're picking and choosing a little bit at the beginning. So this year, they've made it a little more aggressive at the beginning. So maybe instead of being at 20% at mid-quarter, they said we need to be at 30%. And so then at the end of the year, it's just a little bit less, but the same amount of concepts need to be done at the end of the year. MCA test probably a big indicator, slightly up about the same as it was in the past year, which anytime you implement a new program, typically it's a dip. So in a lot of ways, that's some success. We'll see how it goes this year. We're hoping that, definitely would see more of incline. Alex, questions from
Yeah, I'm sure you know that we talked about it when we met with the student council. And so I just pulled up my notes on what the kids had to say. But it was really interesting to hear what they had to say. And they had some really good points. And so I'm wondering if we could take some of their feedback and maybe slightly redesign how we do it. Like, for instance, they said that in the past, the kids that were ahead would kind of help the other kids. But now the kids that are ahead race ahead as fast as they can. It's almost like a race to see who can get to the next class as quick as possible. And they're not helping the kids that are behind. And there's only one teacher in the classroom and all the kids are at different spots. And so the teacher has to go, because they're all at different spots. So what I'm wondering is, can we somehow, and it gave us other...
Last year we had a lot more honor society kids helping out kids in the classroom too. So that's something that we need to look at, is getting some of those kids back in the classroom too, to help out with that.
Or I'm going to guess that maybe 50% of the kids are probably within a day or two or three. I'm making this up. I have no idea. But I'm going to guess a large percentage of them are pretty close to the same spot. If they're maybe moving.
Depends on what topics they're picking though. So remember, it's not like, it's linear where they're just going to go through like a standard textbook. You're going to go through this textbook because they can say, oh, I want to do this topic, now I want to do this topic. And another kid maybe, well, I'm going to do this, this, and this topic.
Well, could we not give them quite as much freedom to try to keep half the class together, or a certain amount, if they're kind of all at the same pace? And again, I've never done this, so I'm making stuff up, but is there any way we could keep a group together with a teacher still doing Alex math?
A couple things there is the teachers are, they have the data, and so they've been doing smaller group instruction with those kids that they know, because they can see, hey, this topic, these kids are ready for instruction on this, or this is the topic that they can do, so the teacher can do smaller group instruction. But a piece of the Alex is so that the kids, really understand the math, opposed to leaving them behind. Before it was lockstep, and some kids got left behind, and they could never get caught up. Now it gets, maybe the kids get a little frustrated, it's like, oh, I got this percent to go, but, we're working with them, we're trying to find, other kids to help them, to keep them motivated, and to help them where they're at. They're gone for a couple days, well, at least, okay, we can get you back on track. We've had kids that have come from other districts, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, in the past, most of those kids did really poorly in math. We've got kids now, okay, they started, at ground zero, and they were able to catch up on those things. So, I appreciate what the kids are saying, and that's definitely something we need to find ways to help more of them. I've been into the classrooms, walking around and helping the kids, and yeah, it's just one teacher, but sometimes the kids are learning that, well, I'll go on to another topic, do a couple of those, and the teacher will be there to help me out. So they're able to do other things opposed to just at a standstill and I can't do anything. They can do other things. It's interesting. I was talking to Spring Grove, and they've had, they're doing Alex, and they're doing it bigger grade spans than we are, and they had some comments about their kids. The kids that traditionally have not done well in math are not afraid to raise their hand now to get help, because no one else knows what they're on, because all the kids are. So they've actually seen a lot of success with those kids that have struggled, and they're essentially doing the same thing as we are, except they have like a math lab, and so they may have 35 kids in there, but they have 2 instructors that are walking around at the same time.
But that means it's multiple grade levels.
And they do. They have 3 to 4, at times grade levels in that classroom.
So what's our class size or a student per teacher? Is it the same as?
Same as it was before.
It
so,
is.
About 15 kids.
Okay.
15 to, 20 something.
That was
that we could have. So yeah, and it's different. It's different for the teachers, because you're right. Figuring out how to help all these kids, and part of it is helping the kids understand. Hey, you go to this topic now, and I'll get to you, because it's a teacher racing around the room the entire hour there, but it's better instructions. We're not losing kids, and that's what was happening before and after. We were truly losing kids when they got there.
So do you think familiarity with the program, the process will help these kids? Leaps and bounds, that's what we're hoping, that's what we're banking
absolutely
on.
hoping for, because we've always talked about how do we differentiate, how do we make sure kids are not get lost. That's the goal.
The most concerns I would associate with that, as far as the kids just adapting to this format. And then as far as, you would think the teacher involvement would be more, but of course you don't hear the happy, the positive stories. You hear about
Yeah. And some are, super happy, but you're right. Some kids are racing on, and, we have kids that are, 8th graders that are in the algebra 2. They've already gone through the geometry because they were ahead last year, and boom, we're not holding those kids back by any means, and they're really enjoying that. And, some of the ones that struggle, at least we're making sure they understand the concepts. And the other thing is, what's nice is, so especially when those kids get to the, geometry, maybe it takes them a year and a half. That's an okay thing, we're saying now. So they could do a, year and a half of the geometry, a year and a half of the algebra 2, still have that year left to take a mathematics class or something and have all their credits in. So if you fail the class, we want them to feel good about the math. That's a piece of it.
And master it.
And master it. And that's the key piece is they're master those topics. It's going to force them to. And another thing is a girl the other day was just, at times, this stuff, and why am I getting this knowledge check, all these other things? Well, because you've learned and it wants to see if you know how to do it. And because she learned these other topics, she actually was able to answer some questions that she hadn't done yet. And so she really jumped on her knowledge check because she mastered some of these other things that helped her have success on new things that she wasn't taught but was able to figure them out and jump way ahead, which was kind of neat. And someone that kind of struggled last year, that was just kind of a success story the other day, a teacher reading that example. So that was kind of neat.
Have we thought with those kids that race ahead of asking them to slow down a little bit and help the other kids? Because I do think there is some value to that. If we're finding that the teacher's really swamped, and I kind of got the kids did say, some kids think it's a race, right? And they're just trying to go as fast as possible, and they kind of questioned, are they really retaining what they're looking? It's a race, and we don't want that either. We want the kids to kind of slow down a little bit, right? And if they can help other kids in the class, that would be a win-win as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, we certainly could, ask them, some of those the high flyers in the class, having a teacher to say, hey, do you want to help out the class today or something, you're way ahead. I think that's fair. That's probably a good thing. That racing, though, are they learning? Yeah, because they have to take knowledge checks, and if they get them wrong, it bumps them back to wherever. Yeah, they have to redo all of those things.
They mentioned that.
They didn't like that, but I tell you, but that's, to me, that's reassuring, saying that,
and maybe at that point they were going too fast. But like Mimi said, I think one of the big concerns that I picked up, other than the racing part of it, and being bumped back, was they kind of liked it when you had other people to help them, because they felt like the teacher was spread out pretty thin. And again, I can understand it because they're all in different levels and they have to get around, and it's not like you're teaching all the class at this level. You're teaching 20 kids, and 20 kids may be at different spots. And the teacher has to maintain that control. Well, you can't hurt fast. So that's not necessarily going to happen. But I think they liked it when some of the other kids, older kids, came in and helped them.
Right.
And gave them some guidance. And I think the older kids seemed, from what I got, they kind of liked it. They kind of liked to go in and help these other kids out. Yeah, it gave them, made them feel pretty good. And so I think if there's something we can do in that part of it, would be nice. Again, going along with what Mimi said.
Especially going in second semester, I think.
You can help them out.
And it was an interesting question because, we had 7th through 12th grade in there, and, all the older kids couldn't speak to it because they've never done it.
Right.
So it was just the younger kids. So.
And the Honor Society kids need service hours. So that would be a great way.
Well, and it's like, some way, we could just, TA it too, and have some of those kids if they want to.
Maybe had good students that good math students, just bring it back. I think that was their whole concern is, it was a race, I want to keep up with the rest of the kids, but I don't have, the teacher's not helping me to get ahead, so I can keep up with that type of situation.
And I thought I had it, and then I got too wrong, and then I went back down.
So you get wrong, got back, bring it out.
The kids that are way ahead, I'll just tell you, they're not asking a lot of teacher help. It's just a quick question, boom, and they're on. Yeah. Whereas we're definitely not holding those kids back, but yeah, it'd be good for them, I agree, that, yeah, thank you for that.
So that was.
Those are-
One of those kids came in my office and thanked me, and I said, thank Mr. Lumber. But there was one where he was just like, this is the best thing ever.
So does
Some kids
Alex,
really like Alex.
does it go to, what math level do we have versus how far does it go?
It will go through calculus, but I don't, and again, this math help, we've said, and this is where I'm at, Algebra 3, we're gonna have classroom for Algebra 3 and calculus, because that would be so intense, teacher needing to help those kids, because even the brightest ones will struggle once they get to that.
And so if we have a kid who's went through Alex and they're at Algebra 3, which I don't know if this is the case or not, and let's say they're like a 8th grader, 9th grader, can they jump right into that in the school? They're allowed to, or are they not? Or they have to wait a year?
They'll have to wait until that year,
The start of a year.
Correct.
So, but they could be 2 to 3 years younger than the other kids in their class, and as long as they understand they're taking high school credits and
they're
junior
gonna
high
get a
level,
credit and they're earning
and it
credits for
goes against their
graduation.
GPA. Yes, I understand.
100%.
Yeah, okay.
Good question, but yeah, that's exactly it. So, other questions on that? Because I have like 3 pages. That's fine.
No, that was good, and we told them too. I mean, it was a great conversation.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
And-
I'm happy that it worked out really well. So
They took all the rest of
yeah, that's good. They should. They're kids. Transcript communication. One thing and I know that was a concern there, and I think the kids, for some reason, were just, Mrs. Swoda. No, we're really articulating to the kids. You can get it from any of 3 places, really. Get it from Mrs. Swoda. You can get it from Judy, or you can get it from me. It doesn't matter who. Sometimes there's other things that need to go with it. Well, then the kids need to understand that you can't say expect it in a day or in 1 hour to get it done. You may have to wait a week if there's recommendations and stuff that need to go with it. But if it's just a simple transcript, yeah, it's quick for me to print it off, sign it, and you just throw an email on it or forward an email. But sometimes I'll take it that way, just coming from my email address. So.
And Gary had an idea when we were sitting there as far as if there was, I know you talked about Mrs. Sabota doing them all, but if she were to have, they were to email her and say, I need transcripts sent to St. Mary's, and if she had it where you or whoever else could do it, got that same email, or she could forward it on, hey, I don't have time, can you handle this? Some way for these kids to get that.
Yeah, and that's what she's, talking to the kids about, just here's the deal, and
These 3 people can do it, make sure they let them know.
Okay, if this is all you need, go to Judy, she'll print it off quick, and she can sign it too. I mean, the college is really going, they don't know whose official signature is the official signature, so, it's fine. It's okay. So that was good. Another thing I just, the band choir concerts, as you know, we split for the high school, the band and the choir concerts to 2 Monday nights. I've heard so many positive comments about splitting them. For me, it's like, oh yeah, two nights, but it doesn't. I love it. I love it because junior high kids are junior high kids, and they struggle to stay quiet for both the band and the choir, and 2 hours long or whatever it is, and then parents with young kids. So many people just loved it. I did hear one person in the community say, well, why is a choir concert at across the Christ Church? So if you ever hear that, it's acoustically so much better than our gym. Because our gym just does not quite echo the way it should. It bounces off every wall there is. Band would love to have it there too, but that is a little bit more difficult to try to get all the instruments over there. So that split was great. I think the teachers will just keep that all the time, because then you get both concerts done in under an hour, and good concerts. And there's not a lot of parents that are involved, and community members that enjoy hearing both of them. I don't think they're going to. Yeah. Busing update. I know Corinne had said something about that. Yeah. It's going okay, the busing. We accept the buses mechanically, but we still need sub drivers. It's just it's taxing on our drivers, knowing that they don't ever want to be on. They know how difficult it is to find someone to rearrange change things. The two people that we did have applied for the job, one just didn't want it because of all the different stuff and mechanical work and all that other stuff. And the other one that we had just, it was significantly below the salaries. And I'm really excited about it, but it was so significantly below we decided.
Is that the one that met the qualification? Okay.
Yeah, just super, yeah. It was interesting. He was a guy that drove bus when he was a kid in Iowa. The superintendent said when he was 18 years old, superintendent said, let's go back. He goes, okay, drive this bus forward. Hey, park it back here. Drive backwards. Great job. You had a bus route in the afternoon, you know, second semester, you know, senior year. He was driving the bus.
It's a good idea, right?
You could do that. And he said, he goes, yeah, back then, that's as simple as that, you know, but, you know, sometimes you have to make sure superintendents can drive.
And that fellow's case then, was he new to the area, or was he reaching out from a distance, applying for this, and then it didn't?
He wasn't reaching out from a distance. I mean, he was, you know, just in a neighboring community, but he's worked in other things, had a mechanical background, you know.
And then when
it was
the dollars
interesting
came
to
up,
him, and it just, you know, thought, hey, this job sounds really good. And I talked to him, I talked to him for about an hour and a half, had him down here, showed him a bus garage. Nothing really scared him away, just a super nice guy, and would have been organized and done some things. But his dad was a bus driver forever and a day for 35 years or something like that. So, you know, he knew what bus driving was all about.
but when it came down to the salary, it wasn't enough.
Not even close.
Did he give you an idea how far off to what he felt?
I bet we were at least 15,000 off.
Out of curiosity, not that that's a movable
No,
amount.
that's about, that's significant, 15,000.
That's where he was thinking it should be, or.
But that's what, figured. You know, sometimes people put on salary ranges, you know, on their application, because we have that, and, you know, a lot of times, you know, it's maybe less than all that, but I think we try to see if we can negotiate, well, you know, it's a lot. So we're just still managing right now, and hopefully maybe someone will. I know there's a lot of feelers out there that we're working on, but it's still working out well to take things over to ready. In fact, they're going so quick and boom, boom, and you know, that hour is about all they've ever needed for anything, and we have all the equipment, so that's been working well. And the people that are working on it now, helping out with the, you know, like oil changes and stuff, they're doing a great job too. So that piece is going well, except we just need more drivers.
I have to say, feedback from a 7-year-old, the van is very fun to ride in.
Well, they're a great driver when it's...
You were morning, I don't know who was evening, she said it was quiet and relaxing, and yes,
That's a nice van.
she loved the van. It was the talk of the
I kind of like driving it with the younger kids, the elementary kids are so fun.
Yeah, I'm sure, yeah, it
They're
was,
kind of fun.
yeah. You know, it's such a huge space, and I'm sure it echoes in the bus.
It's good advertising too.
Yeah. Okay, so the next couple things I want to talk about, I apologize, I might go on too much here, but I've been working with area principals, high school principals, and the Houston County EDA and a couple other organizations with working with school partnerships with these businesses. You know, we hear about how many jobs are going, you know, unfilled, and so we're trying to work in this area. So we're trying to work on finding businesses that will take kids for internships, job shadowing, you know, jobs, going to tours. Give you an example, we did take a group of 10th graders to Winona, and we actually stopped at a Centec first, and they got a tour, talked a little bit about a Centec, which was neat, and then they took them over to Fastenal, and Fastenal gave them a tour, and then they had all the Houston connection people that came and talked to the kids as well, which is really kind of a cool thing for the kids. But we're really trying to reach out to the businesses. It's kind of tricky because really the businesses should be reaching to the schools and saying, we need these kids and here's it, and can you help us out? But they don't always know that realm and how it is, so we're just trying to merge it both together. Winona's done a really nice job of doing some things, and so Houston County's trying to model that a little bit and trying to pull in some things. We're putting together booklets that have all these different businesses and which ones will take kids, so we can talk to kids about, hey, this business here would take someone to be, paid intern or maybe unpaid intern. So that's something that we're really working on. So going along with that, we're going to have 8th grade career cluster day, and I'll talk a little bit about clusters in a second, over at Southeast Tech with a bunch of the area schools. And then there's a 10th grade one already, and there's just a lot of hands-on stuff there. And the other one that I'm quite excited about is the senior one. And they're going to actually have to go through an interview with someone in the business, and they're going to give them some feedback on how they did on their interview skills. And then there's going to be some soft skills training that they're going to do, so different people will do some soft skills. And then there's going to be other business leaders there that are going to talk about their business, what's out there, some on the entrepreneur areas, because that's a big thing too in this area. How do you start up businesses? And so they'll hit their career cluster and they're kind of go into the area that they want to go in, because seniors are kind of already starting to formulate that a little bit. But the key is getting them to understand that probably whatever they want to go into, there's jobs just in this area here. They don't have to go somewhere else. Maybe they go off to college somewhere else, but they can come back here. Or they could say, I want to do this, and some of these businesses will pay for them to get those certificates or those 2-year degrees. You're hearing that a lot. You hear Fastenal on the radio, they're talking about that. Come work for us, and we'll pay for your education too. So that's kind of a neat little thing. So what I did the other day, and there were some other things I did with the survey. Some things didn't work out so well, but on the front back here, I have a survey, and then I had the kids in a career cluster area of what they probably choose to go into. So if we look at the 9th grade, here's, can you share it now?
We can share.
So it's just kind of an interesting thing. If you look at the 9th grade sheet here, and it says here, you look at the 9th grade, engineering was the biggest area there significantly. And then kind of the health science and the ag, food, natural resources piece was there. So you can kind of get an idea there. The 10th grade class, engineering was a big one. There's a lot to that engineering, and I have these career clusters if you want to look at it, and it shows a little bit more what's in some of those areas as well. Oh, you can have it. And then if you flip that page over, you look at the 11th grade, they actually had the ag, food, natural resource area. And then the seniors, I did a bunch more with the seniors, kind of broke it up a little differently, because I also needed to know what class they would want for that senior day, so specifically what job would they go into. But it's interesting there, it's a little bit more spread out than the other grades. Well, that makes sense. Seniors are starting to really look at things, and the health science seems to be the biggest area right now, which I guess surprised me a little bit on my senior class. I didn't know it would be that much higher than the rest, but thought it was kind of neat. So, and the reason I did this, because, always we want to look at electives, and, are we offering enough electives to kids, and, are we putting them in the right destination for their field? And I think that's, I think we're doing an okay job of it. We're giving them exposure to things, definitely the ag thing, but the tough part there is sometimes the kids go, oh yeah, I want this, and they're not going to go into that field, that they're around farming or they like small animals. So we do have those ITB classes, but even the kids that are going into the ag field, because there's a lot of jobs out there in the ag field, but some of those jobs are accounting jobs.
So, I think they don't understand what all falls under that career.
Yeah, so and that's a piece of understanding. What kind of classes do I need? Hey, I want to do this. Well, guess what? You should take anatomy. I want to go be a vet. Well, guess what? Even human anatomy is going to be good for you to take. You kind of need to understand that. So I think this is good to give us a picture of where we're at, and, especially this engineering stuff, and maybe something we need to, think about as we move forward. Yeah, how can we get some more of that engineering, those hands-on things? I think industrial tech, Kyle's doing a nice job trying to come up with ideas for other classes, but some of it is getting the right tools. Luckily there's businesses that will say, hey, yeah, we can give you this older equipment, they bought this new equipment, it's going to be something different, but you know what, there's no way we can train them on the exact piece of equipment that they're going to have out there. It's just like computers. How can we train them on some, whether it's programming or not? We teach them how to program. They may use something different, but they get the concepts of it, which is super important for them to have. But I think we need to continue to look, is there some other kind of, elective areas that we can help our kids with and help, them understand what type of classes they should be taking. But again, we want them, you look at the 9th grade, and my guess is if I did the same thing with these 9th graders, again, as seniors, this would change a lot. And that's okay, because we're giving them exposure to a lot. We're not pigeonholing them into one area right away. We want to give them lots of different options. We can't give them everything, but we can certainly try to give them more.
Yeah, engineering is listed on here, but over here it's not listed.
Oh,
it says
yeah.
Science, technology, engineering, and math. So is it all of those together?
Correct.
So I wonder how much is engineering versus how much is technology, like video games and...
Well, I gave, correct, and that's the thing about these career clusters, I gave them a bunch of different examples that would be under some of those things too. So they definitely could have put themselves, say, I want to be a game programmer, and then that's under there, yeah.
But I would just, my own 2 cents, if there's 41%, I would expect there'd be more kids in robotics.
Correct.
Because that's where they would get the hands-on experience and the really cool stuff and all the exposure.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there's any 9th graders in it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny. So maybe the teachers could push them
If
to...
they're saying that, that's a good point. I'll definitely talk about that.
Does any of this info, the students you have, isn't there a career profile thing that you keep on the students?
Yeah.
And does any of this tie into that, or?
Correct. And so the kids also do this, with when we do our ramp up to readiness curriculum, and they're doing some of these interest surveys. Okay. And so they kind of know which area in the career cluster that they do. So they've done that before. I just wanted to be able to grab some data, because that was all individual and I couldn't grab it out. So I thought, let's just do a quick, Google, form survey. And, so it's okay. I did one with all the electives and the survey. All of a sudden, right away, if they pushed one and they could only rate 10, and if they did one, they couldn't unclick it, and it was kind of a mess. So, but this was better data. This was at least gave me an idea, and especially the seniors, and as they move up in the grades, the data gets better with the career cluster. But again, it's something that we need to be aware of, that we need to make sure are we giving our kids what they need. I think we give them a great, general education, and we have some great, classes, but we can't offer everything.
So is that the field day or the Centec and Fastenal visitation, is that going to be an annual thing?
Yeah, we're just trying to branch out, and that's why I'm working with this group. We want to do more of that. Another vision that we had would be to take maybe a 10th grade group, from Houston, and 10th grade Caledonian, and Spring Grove and La Crescent, and then maybe these businesses, we have like 6 businesses, 7 businesses, and we just go from one to another in the different communities. Because you look at Caledonia, they have some, pretty good businesses down there that, Mican's down there. Do people know that you can be an engineer down there, and make $100,000 in Caledonia? It's like, I don't think they understand some of these businesses that are around here, and it'd be nice to, and that's kind of our goal, but it's getting the businesses to understand, this is how you recruit kids, and how do you present in front of kids, and those are skills that I think we have to help businesses over there with too. So that's why we're trying to partner.
Well, I think they've gotten away from that. I mean, years ago, 25, 30 years ago, you probably had more of that interaction with businesses and schools where it kind of broke apart, and now you're trying to reinvent that.
Right.
How do we bring these kids
Well, some of it is
They
just
need a
been-
kid, they need
yeah,
them.
the focus of 4-year, which is great. I think we should, get kids ready for a 4-year. But if they don't, are they ready for the 2-year, or are they ready to go out in the workforce and get a job right away?
And
be
that
able to
was the
work?
other thing that was brought up at that meeting we had with the kids. A lot of them felt like they weren't ready for even the simplest things like budgeting. Remember, there was a couple kids.
Life skills.
Life skills. How do I do this? And I think there's a class on that, but I don't know that they even know that there's a class on that.
Well, we have the economics class. They talk a lot about the finances and stuff. I mean, and we have a careers class, and so we
That's
do
all
some of
covered
those
in
things.
careers.
Although, what's the group where they get together and talk?
The ramp up to readiness group.
Yes, now that Lily is a senior, just the other day, she texted me and said, do I have a credit card? Is it in my name or yours? And my building
Is that the
credit?
day I talk?
I'm like, what?
Is that the day I talked to about credit
Well,
cards?
whoever helps them in ramp up as a senior, they're really getting exposed to more of that. And I was gonna say, for business, you should reach out to FlexCraft, because they've been a great partner with robotics.
Already have.
Okay,
They're-
yeah,
they're
because
on
he
the-
would,
they're
yeah,
on-
yeah,
They're
he's
on
like,
our list. Yeah, they're absolutely on our list.
so one more item, I quickly looked at my screenshot of the meeting, was another topic that I'm hoping we could talk about again in the future, because I think the kids felt they actually were, it was pretty, some were in favor and some weren't, was taking home laptops. We had a pretty lengthy discussion about like Chromebooks and whether they should go home, and kids that don't have them at home and they might be in 2 or 3 sports. And, as we move to more stuff on Schoology, how do they have access to that? And when we asked them, for the most part, the upperclassmen all had their own that they had purchased, but the younger kids didn't. And so it kind of seemed like the trend was, they started off just using the Chromebook, but they really found it difficult not being able to work at home with their Chromebook. So anyway, just food for thought.
Well, yeah, no, I think that's something that, board, should talk a little bit about. Even if it's a matter of working with a vendor like Best Buy or something and say, here, we got this deal, you can buy it for, $150. I mean, that's the thing. These Chromebooks are really cheap and I don't think that the kids and the families probably understand how cheap they are too. And then those kids that aren't, we find a way to help those that financially can't afford that. But there's a lot of decisions that need to be made on that. And every school is different. And, some schools are getting away from it and saying, no, you can't manage this, and some are going to tablets, and some go to the absolutely. So, yeah, I mean that's definitely something to talk about. But again, I'm kind of a side note. I don't know if it's public. If there's those kids that absolutely have to, we talk about it, and I have a checkout process with them, and they check it out for me. So they have not been denied that as long as they've never used it or been able to do that. Yeah. But the key is, once it's ours, we're managing that all the time. So the neighboring school to the west, they essentially the kids are buying those items.
And they know, the kids know, they have friends in other schools, so they know that,
Yeah, they know.
other kids are purchasing the laptops and they get good deals from Best Buy or whatever.
Right,
And
right.
they see,
And so it's something that, maybe we could then say, hey, you know what, at the end of the year, just say, that's a pretty cheap piece of technology, that you can get as long as you have the Wi-Fi at home.
That's
My mother-in-law.
the first question. That's the first question. It's how many of our families don't have access to Wi-Fi? I mean, we have to answer that question first.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you get a divide right away, but we
everybody
got to
in the,
gather some information.
Yeah.
everybody in the room at the time had internet,
Right.
but that was just a very small group of kids.
Years ago, we had, I think there was a questionnaire on that, I think most had it, but the problem is, it's like, yeah, we have a computer at home, oh great, mom wants to get on it, dad wants to get on it, 3 siblings want to get on it, and so, it's 5 people with 1 computer. I'd say that would probably be more the problem and why they, another device would be good for them. Yeah.
And Houston is not a community that's had the broadband go through, where some of our neighboring communities do have the rural broadband that have been in.
Well, I think we need to discuss it. We just got to figure out who.
We got to just collect some data
Yeah.
and find out
Well,
where things and
You
stuff.
want to get home yet?
Right. Okay.
You have more items?
I can find more items.
Is that it, Todd?
You know what, since it is my time, I just thank Gary for all your work on the board. I think you've been a great
great board member, and I do appreciate everything. You ask good questions, and just, so thank you on behalf of my high school staff. Thank you.
And thank you, Todd, for, I think we all enjoyed a lot talking to the high schoolers. Your first student council, it was really.
That's great, and I think
really
they
fun.
enjoyed it. They loved their voice heard, and that's good,
Yep.
good for them.
Yeah, it was a
Do
lot
it
of fun.
again.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks again. Old business, items for discussion and approval, of course, the levy certification, we've been talking about this.
Yeah.
We talked about the numbers.
So now you have to.
We have to decide what number we're going with. And, I mean, I know where I was at on this. I was thinking that second to the last one, right, Gwen? I think it was my thought process. The
Property tax rate of
plus
0.
30, yeah.
The 0.
0.59, which basically takes us back to where we were at before.
So you're doing the 0.592 or the 0.596?
Six.
Okay.
That one. That would be my thought process. Again, I'm just one of many here. So, I don't know, that we talked about at the finance committee, that's kind of where, am I correct in saying this, maybe that we were at that point, that would be our recommendation?
Yeah, I don't know that, I don't remember, we just had the audit report and we were 110,000 negative. So, and this is pretty much holding steady, is that correct?
This is flat revenue.
Right, so, I think it's minimal. I would definitely lean more towards, after the audit review, the 5.3 instead of the 4.6.
Yeah, the 0.596,
Yeah.
correct. So, anyway, I'd like to have everybody's opinion on it. Gary?
Yeah, that's what the finance committee is recommending.
Michael?
With you.
Yeah, agreed.
Okay. So, do we have a vote?
We have a motion first.
Motion to approve, we just want to say the levy on the.
Just set the levy, yeah.
Set the levy at 0.596.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Amy here. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. January organizational meeting for 2019. I think everybody got a copy of that email from Corinne, changing it to the 10th. Do we have a motion to approve that change?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Gary. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So, other things that we, outdoor cameras for the preschool. That came up in discussion a few times. Do we have a motion to approve the new cameras?
So moved.
Motion? Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Custom alarm keys entry system. We discussed this at the last, I think, let Gary give a good briefing on what was going on there, as far as costs and everything. Do we have a motion to approve that?
Motion.
Motion by Colleen. Have a second?
Second.
Second by Gary. Discussion?
We did have those firmed up, those numbers were locked in.
Yeah. Any other questions, John? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Resolution establishing combined polling places.
We have to do this every year before December 31st.
Motion to approve the resolution or to combine polling places as presented.
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Policies for second reading. I don't believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Michaeline, there was many changes on these.
It allows for Skype.
Yeah, that's the only thing.
So do we have a motion to approve policy. Okay, have a motion by Colleen. Have a second? Second, discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? New business, we don't have any. Announcements, important events, MSBA conference coming up. January, all of those that want to attend, hopefully they're on the list. I don't know, Mimi, if you are gonna go up there this year,
I don't think so.
well, you'll be missed.
I'm sure I will be.
I think everybody else is already identified, correct? And you got the list. Breakfast. When is that coming up?
February 2nd. And they're moving it to a different place. It's not going to be at Southeast Service Co-op, but Rochester Schools is partnering with them. And so they're actually hoping that the legislators will show up. Because that's why it got canceled last year.
Well, it's gonna Saturday.
Oh, it did get flat out canceled.
It got flat out canceled last year because most of the legislators were not going to come.
Okay.
So we're hopeful this year.
Is there any other
Let me
events?
know if you want to go. Email me and I'll get you signed up.
And I will be attending, so we can take a school vehicle.
Anything else on that, Corinne, you have for events?
Nope.
Meeting and committee updates?
Michaeline and I went to the Houston County Collaborative. I'm still waiting for emails for the 2 other people that are supposed to be part of the collaborative, and then we'll be meeting again January 24th. Finances are dwindling, and so we'll need to look at, we've been getting $20,000 from the collaborative for the last 4 years, including this year, and next year that will probably go down to about 14,000 from 20, because it's gathered using random moments, and they're just phone calls that come to counselors and other people that we've got on our list, and then the state puts it through a calculator, and your random moments generate funds, which sounds incredibly nebulous. I know, but that's what we've been told, and the money is dwindling, so we need to live within our means.
So,
And Michaeline, is there anything you'd like to add?
Well, only that the superintendent's talked quite a bit about how to help make their people on their list aware that the random moments matter, and to respond to them in a way that is more likely rather than less to generate revenue for the collaborative. So hopefully you took some of that and are planning to do what you can.
Right.
Yeah. It only applies to our local schools, our local students, and the people that work locally with those students, not MNBA.
And the other thing, we're still working out, trying to get the transportation agreement with the county as far as transporting foster children and who's responsible for that. And that's something where all 4 schools in the county are having issues. It's not that we don't want to provide the transportation, and it's not that the county won't pay for the transportation. It's having a person or a vehicle to transport the kids. And so then it's, what do we do when we don't have a driver? We don't have a driver or a van to provide the transportation. How are we going to do that? Because I know Caledonia is now in a new situation where they're going to have the same pain point. Spring Grove ended up having to buy a new van just for foster transportation. And the county said, we can't pay for the van. Yeah.
So there's other monies, you're saying we're gonna lose about $6,000. Are they looking at ways of?
The collaborative money right now, no.
No?
No, the discussion was a lot of some of the soups were surprised that the money lasted as long as it did. It's definitely needed. And they talked about talked about how it would be important perhaps to look for alternative grants and revenue sources, because it covers, what do we use our collaborative
Preschool.
dollars for?
Preschool.
So,
100% of the 20,000 goes to preschool.
So we will need to be picking that up if the collaborative money isn't there, or looking for other grant.
And I'm assuming that's already in the works. The superintendent's already looking at other options. too.
Well, they just started talking about it because we don't know what is out there, but working with the HR guy, or the human services guy from
John
the county.
Mhm.
He's got a lot of experience with collaboratives and is seemingly knowledgeable, and so maybe he will advocate for it on our behalf, of the member schools and other organizations. SEMCAC's a part of it, HVED's a part of the collaborative, Hiawatha Valley Mental Health is part of the collaborative, and then the school districts, right?
And Houston County
Corrections is part of it. So there are other county organizations that also, benefit from this. They get some of the funding, so it's in everybody's interest to try and make it up and keep it going, because everyone's kind of come to depend on, even though it's a little bit of money, it's being used.
Mm-hmm.
And you either have to cut that out, cut the services that are supplied, or pick up the tab.
Which is also why that legislative breakfast is so important, because we need to talk about preschool funding.
Yeah.
That's just, we've kicked the can down the road long enough. Wisconsin has 4K. I don't know why Minnesota can't.
Okay. Anything else on it? Any other updates?
On HVED, I had the SOOP meeting. There's a lot going on there, and they're looking at ways to improve, and they're doing major budget changes mid-year, which make me nervous anytime you're adding positions to a budget mid-year, where we just saw the impact of having 6 fewer kids than what we had planned the budget on. When they know their kids already this year, and they're budgeting for extra payroll with no extra kids to cover it, it makes me just really nervous. But they feel that they need, for their River Valley alternative school, their teacher is retiring in June, and so they wanted to hire a new teacher in January. So the new teacher had 6 months with the retiring teacher to figure out how to do the alternative school before the seasoned teacher retires. And then they are also renting a space at Southeast Tech, because they were hoping that some of their alternative school kids would want to take some classes at the tech college, so they're renting a room there. And so since it's going to be off-site, they needed somebody that could serve as kind of a dean of students. So they're also hiring a dean of students. And for me, you need to do what's right for kids, but the dollar signs just kind of were rolling in my head, and I just...
And those both got board approval then already?
Jean couldn't be here tonight, so
I'm just curious.
Yeah.
How many students are they talking about serving with this classroom, this random space?
The space can hold up to, I think, 15, but at their alternative school right now, they have 13 kids.
They needed a dean of students, a full-time dean of student warden for that.
They because it's offsite, they felt they needed that. Because right now, when they're at Kellogg, in the Kellogg building, they have Amy is there as a
seems like it's a lot of money. I mean, they're this 6 months ahead of time. Again, I'm an educator, but I don't know. Do you need 6 months for that? I don't know. Michaeline, you would know. I mean, maybe
You thought it was a bit excessive.
but it seems a little much.
But they
And then have a position you're bringing up when you don't even necessarily, what you're telling me to us is they don't necessarily have students yet. The possibilities there. So they could hire this dean of students and it may not be any students for that dean.
Well, they need the teacher too.
they
They
need
But
a
you know what I'm
teacher.
saying, they need,
But they could say the same thing, because we're now building the Destinations Academy and we need to hire people before we have kids. So I get that, I do, but it just, I just wanted
Well,
you,
did you get that, you forwarded that survey from
Right,
HVAC?
right.
Did you
did
look at
everybody
it?
fill out the survey?
oh, yeah, that's right.
I mean, that was
It was
all looking
closed
on,
today
it was looking for, you know, solutions. I mean, it was looking for input on trying to think, what are we gonna do about location and the needs, right? I don't know what they're gonna do, but that's what it was sent out to all the school boards and administrators.
School board members, administrators, all special education teachers,
Okay,
yes.
so I don't know, hopefully Jean and you will hear something about the results of that, if that.
I'm assuming they'll have a meeting coming up now that that's closed today, you said, right, this afternoon?
Yep.
We should have some results and then they'll have a meeting on it. Get back to us next year. Seems so far away.
But it just, yeah. So I want you, because that, any decision that's made as far as locations and facilities, as you all know, facilities, no matter what changes you're talking about, it's talking about an outlay of cash.
Yeah, dollars. Okay. Is that it on each other? Anything else? Superintendent feedback? Thank yous?
Thank yous? Yes. To Gary, this is your last meeting. And you have, been a board member and, since March of 2006. What?
2006.
2006.
Guess you forgot.
Well, yes, because it would be, yeah, you were also appointed.
Yeah, I remember Ron calling me.
Yep.
And saying you will, or
And,
else we won't be pickleball anymore.
Way before pickleball.
Oh.
Throughout the years, you have, as chair on facilities, you have really done a great service for the district, for the community, and especially, and most importantly, for our students. They're in a facility that they are very proud of, and a lot of that thanks goes to you for helping make that happen.
Well, I just helped you keep the ball rolling.
I gotta get somebody to start pushing the ball.
Yeah.
Keeping it rolling is one thing.
Yeah.
You gotta get it going.
So we have do you have the?
I got it.
Okay.
We got you a little something, Gary.
All right.
We don't think you have an I Love Me wall, but you can put that somewhere in your bathroom. Then we got a card for you. I think Josh can sign it here yet. I don't think you had an opportunity to sign it. A little something for you in there. But for me as another board member, I mean, I appreciate all you've done. I mean, I mentioned that a few times. You've been a great asset to the board. You've been very helpful to all of us, the community. I think you've done a hell of a job in a lot of different ways. You know, helped me out as a vice chair and everything else you've done. Facilities is just one of many things that you've touched in this as a board member, and I know I appreciate it. I'm sure the rest do. So.
Well, I'm very fortunate to have served on a board that gets along as well as, I mean, we all have differing opinions at times, but we don't have the knockdown, drag 'em out fights that some boards do that we're familiar with.
Those are not when we negotiate. You're not part of that committee.
So.
So,
You're gonna have all these extra nights.
He can come and be our audience that we never had.
Yeah, exactly. He'll be the public comment. No, really, Gary, I just want to say thanks a lot, man. Appreciate all your help. Thank you. It's been a fun ride.
Standing O.
Anyway.
There's more than just thank yous in there. There's actually, you get some fun stuff in there.
So, with that being said, do we have a motion to adjourn? And we can have some cookies. Do we have a motion?
Oh, so moved.
Do we have a second? Second. Discussion, all in favor? Opposed?